Welcome, everyone. My name is Elena Sinel. I am the founder of Teens in AI, and I'm here to welcome you to what will be a really exciting and engaging discussion around a topic that's super close to my heart, the equity. And of course, it's International Women's Day, or almost, tomorrow, and we're here to celebrate what is one of the most important days in the calendars of all women. It's where we get together, we celebrate, we discuss how important it is, the discussion of equality and equity. And it is important to also emphasize this year's theme, Embrace Equity, which is something we discuss a lot in the world of AI and AI ethics. And equitable AI is something we really want to see happen as we drive the technology and deploy the technology into the world. And this is something that's really important here at Teens in AI because diversity, inclusion, representation of voices and everyone's views as we build technology is hugely important to ensure that we live in the equitable world that we want to build. So this year's campaign that we ran in February took place in 18 locations around the world, which is one of our biggest campaigns yet. And we are going to run our demo day, global demo day, where we hope every one of you will join us as we will be watching teams from Ghana, Tunisia, Morocco, and South Africa present their project, as these are the top finalists. Of course, we cannot drive our mission on our own. So this year we are supported by Capgemini, Sage, and Societe Generale, and we are super happy that they are joining us today on the panel to discuss the topic of equity and equality in their working spaces and in life in general. So I am, on this note, going to pass it over to my colleague, Lucy, who will be the moderator for this session. And she is our head of partnerships and COO, and she will be the one to introduce the panel and lead on this hugely important topic whilst I step into the background, do my mom duties, and come back for the networking session later on. Over to you, Lucy.
Great. Thank you so much, Elena, for the introduction, and welcome everyone, all of you who are joining us today in today's session, where, as Elena said, we will be celebrating as a pre-celebration International Women's Day, where we will be exploring the topic around Embrace Equity. So nevertheless, before I move on to that, I would love to introduce our guest panels, which we have today. And starting off with Magdalene, who is a group manager and a digital advisory at Avanade UK. And Magda's background is in data science, and she has been working with data for more than 10 years, 7 of those which are in the tech industry. I also love that Magda has established a setup of Women's Employee Network at Avanade UK and has led the group to become a successful and mature inclusion and diversity network group. Today, we also have Rusa Sonti joining us from Capgemini. She is the head of insights and data practice in Finland, and as a big supporter of diversity herself, she is also an active member of Capgemini's Global Inclusion and Diversity Innovation Network. Rusa is also a business builder by heart and believes that with data, we can truly drive businesses and society towards a more sustainable future. In today's panel, we also would love to welcome Cadence from Sage, who is a VP of Sage Foundation, and she's passionate about supporting the next generation of entrepreneurs to grow sustainable businesses, as well as giving young people access to STEM skills and supporting entrepreneurship in the developing world. Cadence also sits on the board of the London-based social enterprise called Abianda, which works with vulnerable women and girls. So it's certainly a great and important mission overall as well. And last but not least, today we also have Noémie Elezam joining us from Societe Generale. She has more than 15 years of international experience in varied roles across the financial services sector at Societe Generale, with her latest appointment being Chief Digital Strategy Officer in the business. Her mandate is to boost the company's business models, digital transformation, and scale up the innovation strategy, leveraging shared strategic governance and steering impactful group, external partnerships, and organization agility. So I join all of you to give all our panels a big welcome who will be joining us today. So thank you for that. Now, before we get started, I would like to introduce a little bit around the topic of Embrace Equity, as this is the year's theme that's been set out by the International Women's Day organization. So I'd like to start by reflecting, what does this actually mean and how is it different from equality? Often we see the terms equity and equality being used interchangeably. However, they are not the same. So for a moment, and bear with me, for those of you who are joining us as our audience, I would like to invite you for a moment to close your eyes and imagine the following scenario, where you have, for example, 3 kids, each one of them of different heights. They are standing at a fence, trying to look over the fence to the other side. Each one of them is standing on top of a box of the exact same size and dimensions. One kid can clearly see over the fence. Another can barely see over it. And the third kid, can't see anything because of their height. So I would like to invite you to ask yourselves, is this equity? So therefore, as expressed by the International Women's Organization, and please, if you close your eyes, you're welcome to open them again. Equality is defined as each individual or group of people being given the same resources or opportunities. However, equity recognizes that each person has different circumstances and allocates the exact resources and opportunities needed to reach an equal outcome. In short, equality is the goal, and equity can be defined as the means to reach that goal. Therefore, in today's session, together with our guest panelists, we will be touching upon these different scenarios when it comes to reflecting equity and what could this look like in practice. So therefore, I would like to open the panel discussion. And given the diverse profile and amazing career pathways that we see from our guest panel today, I would love to kick us off by asking, what would inspire you to enter the field you are currently working in? And perhaps, Magdalene, would you like to get us started?
Sure. Well, thank you so much. And it's a pleasure to be on this session. My background by no means is tech. I started off as a data degree in French and Spanish. That was my first degree. And I went on to do economics for my master's degree. Had no idea, had no thought I was going to do tech. So sitting here and saying I have a background in data science, there's definitely a journey of a jump from no tech into tech. And what made me do that? Well, at the time, I really was looking to change my career because I'd reached that point where I wasn't growing much within my industry, which was market research. I did a bit of research and I realized that there was a huge potential for data science to become that area I would do really well in, considering my background in economics and econometrics. But most importantly, it was also because I realized that there was a potential in terms of the technology, the growth, and what it will mean in terms of innovation and how the future evolves and what impact the technology is going to play in that whole the world becoming more of a technology-based kind of space. So that got me really excited, and I really wanted to be a part of that journey into the whole AI transformation. That was back 7 years ago. So I'm really pleased that I did that transformation or that move into tech. Yeah, that was my background very quickly.
Thank you so much. And certainly a varied and not a straight line, which I'm sure many other in the audience can identify, including myself. Yes, and also I would like to invite Russo also to share a little bit about your experience and what inspired you to get into the field that you currently are in.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for having me here. I think it's really, really inspiring to be with all of you in this discussion, first of all. But I actually do have a similar story or background with Magdalene. So I come from business. And definitely when I was still studying, I didn't think that I would end up making a career in tech. So at the moment, I am working as the head of data and insights or insights and data at Capgemini in Finland. And I have started in tech more than 10 years ago. I've been working with many things in this space, but then kind of for the past years, I've been really specifically focusing on data and AI. And basically, why did I end up here instead of doing something else in tech? So I want to maybe open that up a little bit. So first of all, I feel like when you talk about data and AI, so they are really endless opportunities for kind of learning and growing. I feel like in data and AI, it's interesting that kind of only your imagination is basically limiting what you can do with that. So that I think that is one of the main things. So I do actually myself get bored really easily. And in this field, I feel like, okay, there are no limits. Like you cannot get bored because you can always come up with new things. And if you don't, the market or kind of the field or your customers will. So that is the first thing. And then maybe the second thing when we talk about tech. So, okay, here we are in a very international setup today here as well, right? So I have always loved to work or be around kind of different cultures and international environment. I've lived in many different countries, such as like Portugal, US, Indonesia, Italy, so different places. So kind of cultures and this environment of, like different kind of people coming from different backgrounds really inspires me. And what could be better place to kind of experience that every day than tech? So I think that is definitely the other than side of it.
Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing your background, Rusa. And I would like to invite Cadence this time.
Thanks. And yeah, hi, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here today alongside such an esteemed panel. My career story is one of two halves, actually. I spent the first half as a communicator, helping organizations like Sage tell their stories. And it was in this field that I first started taking an interest in sustainability, particularly the role that organizations can play in building sustainable communities. I had what you could call a bit of a light bulb moment when I was living in Australia, and I had the privilege of visiting some remote Aboriginal communities there, where for the first time I really experienced the barriers and the inequality facing underrepresented groups, and how the right partnerships, support, resources that organizations have at their disposal can really be applied to make a significant difference both now and in the future to the outcomes of various groups. I'm now really privileged that this is my day job, and I do this for Sage, leading Sage Foundation alongside my job share partner, Helen. And our mission is to knock down barriers in our communities so everyone has an equal opportunity to thrive.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Cadence. Really great experiences there as well. And what about you, Naomi? How did you get into your field of work?
Yes, good evening, everyone, and thank you for having me. I'm very happy to be with you girls today. I will be probably the first ones to tell you that I was not made to do tech at the very beginning, because my academic background was more about political sciences, history, and business. So the reason why I started to work in a bank is because I was a kind of realistic dreamer, and I was very conscious very early that money is probably the fuel that you need to turn and to succeed in any ambitious project. So I really wanted to work in making the financial services more accessible, more seamless, and more personalized for the one who need them, being individuals, being corporates, or other financial institutions. And while I was working, so I started my career also on the business side. And when we started to discover the huge potential of digital technologies in terms of turning the financial services so much more accessible, and some exclusive services also to turn them very accessible for a lot of people, very easy to use, very also corresponding to a common level of quality and so on. I really realized that tech was a lot much that what I was expecting, and it was absolutely essential to be able to leverage this technology in order to really reinvent the customer experience. But not only the customer experience, also the whole culture of the company, which was another domain where I was very interested in, the transformation in itself and the way people can adapt to new situation and could leverage new resources in order to be better. So this is how I became a Chief Digital Strategy Officer for Société Générale and started to lead the digital transformation of our different countries and different businesses.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that introduction as well, Naomi. So now I would like to touch upon one of the first questions of tonight's discussion, and just building on what you said, Naomi, actually, I would like to highlight. So you won an We Equal award back in 2022, and as part of a movement that seeks to tackle the lack of diversity and equality under the leadership of the world's largest businesses. So when it comes to career advancement, what equity-based actions do you feel could be taken by global companies to support more women to break what's often called the glass ceiling, that those barriers that often hold back women to reaching those top senior positions in the C-suite? So could you tell us a little bit your take on that?
Yeah, with pleasure. So I think the first thing that we need as global company, but the first thing you need anyways, while you want to entrepreneur a big project with a big ambitious, is to have a North Star. That means that you need to be clear on what good looks like and where you want to go. This is the reason why I really think that big companies need to have targets in terms of diversity and in terms of equity and equality. We start from too far to be able to think that while changing nothing, we are going to reach the goal. So I think the first thing that we need, and Société Générale, of course, has committed, but such have a lot of big companies, to have 30% at least of women in top management by 2023. So I think we definitely need this quantitative ambitions to really change things. What you need also is to have someone in charge and someone at the biggest level. In Société Générale, one of our general manager is, of course, the sponsor of all our diversity and inclusion policy, but it's then also materialized in a board, in an executive board, such as you could have for risk management or financial considerations. So diversity and inclusion has to be a strategic topic and to be governed as a strategic topic if you really want to reach results. So this is what we are doing in Société Générale, and this is, to my mind, the only way to really translate the targets in very concrete action plan and to be able to reach the goals you've set. This is about, let's say, governance and steering. The second thing I think you really need when you are a big company is to find a way to make it possible. So the first set of action maybe that you can put in place, that you can help the women who want to succeed. That means not only having processes that are non-discriminatory or non-exclusive, you need really inclusive processes. If I take the example of recruitment, for example, we try to recruit more women in our corporate and investment banking part, which is a part which is traditionally very masculine. And we had a recruitment process. Every managers and every HR have been trained to be more conscious of their bias and so on, but we did not manage to reach the result we wanted to reach. And we realized that because there were a lot of men in the company, there were recruitment processes or promotion processes where some women who were candidates, they just did not meet any woman. So we decided proactively to say, no, it's not normal. In any recruitment process or any promotion process, you need to meet a woman, being a man or being a woman, just to have, a diverse look at your profile and to also systematically have this different lens in analyzing the profile of the candidate. So it is an example to help the women at this magic moment of a recruitment, for example, of a promotion, to be able to have the whole chance that they deserve. And of course, before this magic moment, I think we need also to invest in coaching the women for them to dare ask for, to dare know also what they want to bring strategically when they apply to strategic roles, because at some point when you start to go on director positions and so on, it's not so much about are you able to do the job, it's about the vision that you have about the job and what you want to do with the job. So women have to be coached to be able to vocalize this ambition. And I think the third thing, which is very important, is that we also have to bring more women to want to apply, because many women do not even want to apply today because they do not have enough role models, because they do not feel that there is enough work flexibility, work organization flexibility, for example, and also because maybe they do not see enough diversity, not only gender diversity, but diversity in general, which means that they do not have an image of the top management which gives them really the willing to apply and to be part of it. So I think big corporates have also a set of action to do to showcase role models. For example, we have 20% data scientists, women data scientists in Société Générale, and it's really a job to showcase them, to make them talk about their businesses and so on, to also inspire other women. So yes, this would be the three maybe kind of action plans I would recommend for big corporates.
Excellent. Thank you so much for your reflections on that, Naomi. And of course, we're not aiming to answer that question completely today, given that is a very big topic. And certainly we need everyone contributing to this particular scenario. So I think some really great examples, best practice that you have shared there, that hopefully those in our audience today and beyond can take some inspiration as well. So moving on to a next topic, and I would love to come back to excuse me, to Rusa. And as we heard from the introduction, you're a successful data-powered innovation leader in your field. However, as a side passion, you have been a former swimming Finnish championship medalist. And this, again, sport is often another area of society where women face barriers to entry. Could you tell us a little bit about what inspired you down that path as your side passion? And were there any particular barriers perhaps that you faced along the way? And if so, what do you think could potentially be done to continue inspiring more women into sports, particularly through equity?
Yeah, those were the days. still practicing swimming so hard, but yes, definitely. And basically how I ended up being sort of, I don't know if you can call it professional, but anyway, like very serious athlete, let's put it this way. So I was very focused on that. So I am very competitive by nature, and I have always loved to really like work hard for my targets. And for this, this was probably the reason why I got so hooked up in swimming. So you get to really train hard. But anyway, I think that I have been fortunate in a way that I think that as a sport, swimming is very equal. So we have always trained together in the same team with the guys, and we have competed in the same contests and so on. And nowadays there are even like a mixed relay kind of team. So women and men, kind of girls and boys or whatever you are actually competing in the same team together. So that is quite cool. And because of that, I feel like I've never felt that I would be somehow in a weaker position compared to the guys in the sports. And I have been actually swimming in Finland, of course, being part of the national team, for example. But then I've also studied in the US, and I was part of the university team. And also there we did the same. So we always trained together, everybody. So it's been sort of like maybe even a pathway for me to really feel comfortable also working in tech. So kind of like having, anyway, like majority of the people in tech at the moment still is guys, but I don't feel that as a big thing. I feel like I'm at home. So maybe that is also like, or we could think of sports as one way of really like kind of embracing working together for kind of all of people, not only for girls, of course. It's also like maybe some learnings for the guys, so that okay, you if you do some sports from the times that you're very young, you kind of like feel natural being around, different kinds of people. So I think that we could think about it this way. And then I want to give you another example, because okay, I've been a swimmer, and then there is another passion of mine, which is actually surfing. And why I wanted to mention surfing is that the World Surf League has actually taken big steps in equity and equality. So as the first professional level kind of sports league globally, World Surf League has started to pay kind of the same prices for both female and male athletes. And I think that is great progress, because of course, like when we think about, for example, ice hockey or soccer or motorsports, whatever, which are very, I would say, like from origin, like manly sports. So in those sports, the situation is still completely different. And I think that there a lot of change should happen, you know. But anyway, I think that as I said, I think that this sports background has really given me kind of tools to work together in a kind of diverse environment. So I think that is maybe one reason then why I also ended up here. Maybe then the last thing that I really want to mention is that I kind of like, I feel that I'm really lucky to actually be living in Finland from this point of view. So we have had, you know, female presidents. So we have kind of the role models there. We have at the moment the prime minister who is actually younger than me. Well, I don't know if that's young or not, but anyway, who is very popular. And then I feel like Finland has also given me the foundation, or kind of the really equal opportunities from the start. So of course, like we see these kind of like unfortunate things, like females being judged all the time and so on. But at the same time, like I feel like if you have the chance to be a pioneer and be out there and be a role model for kids, whether it's in sports or, you know, in politics or in business, so we should take the chance and be it. But I feel like sports has really like you know, maybe led me to this path that I am in right now.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that, Rusa. And I absolutely love the fact that you mentioned that being in a sport that's lucky enough does support that male female interaction, and in a way an equal participation, which perhaps we don't see in other sports that we also explored a little bit in last year's panel. But great at the same time, I think it could also serve as inspiration the other way around. Also, boys and young men being used to as well to having that female and girls presence, and knowing that you're working together as one team, as one unit, and that is not about competition, is not about favoritism. And likewise, I think having men and young boys joining in the conversation when it comes to equity and equality is equally important, and we'll explore and touch upon that topic in a moment as well. So thank you for that. And now what I would like to come back to a little bit is to explore the topic of entrepreneurship. So I would like to invite Cadence to tell us a little bit more about this. And as many would be aware, that we often hear countless times how women face multiple bias when it comes to either the way they are described as a founder based on their capabilities versus the type of language and terminology that is used for their male peers, for example. And also at the same time, how they end up being the ones to least benefit from when it comes to obtaining VC capital funding. So only approximately 2% of that funding pot goes to women. So certainly these are just a few examples of the barriers that can be experienced by female founders. And I'm very curious to know, from a Sage perspective, there's loads of amazing entrepreneurship-led programs that are being undertaken. So would you be able to tell us a little bit more about this, Cadence, and how is your company challenging the status quo to support female entrepreneurs through equity?
Sure. Great question, and such an important topic, one that I'm personally very passionate about, but also Sage is as well. And I think we recognise that unfortunately entrepreneurialism or entrepreneurship isn't equally accessible to everyone. There are many barriers, including gender, when it comes to wanting to start or run or own your own business. And the lens that we put on that in Sage Foundation is that we focus on increasing access and inclusion to entrepreneurship. So we work with partners that help to increase our ability to make an impact. Some examples of how we've been doing that over the last couple of years, I get really passionate and excited about is one of them is our relationship, the 3-year relationship with an organization called the Boss Network, which stands for Bringing Out Successful Sisters Network, who promote and encourage the small business spirit and career development of women of color. So we have supported, we provided funding to 35 Black female entrepreneurs in year one of that partnership, each of whom received a $10,000 grant to grow their business, alongside wraparound business advisory services, training, discounted Sage product, mentorship. We've actually just entered into year two of that, that grant scheme. We had over 14,000 women apply. The sorts of barriers that it helps these women to address are things like from employing people to employment to HR, legal advice, etc. It's really helping them to grow and scale their business, because we know that access to funding is unfortunately a real issue for Black women in the US. Another example of a program that we work with, and this really helps to mobilize and use our incredibly talented and passionate people at Sage, but also our partners in the wider Sage ecosystem, is our partnership with Kiva, which supports entrepreneurs in developing countries with what you call microloans, and it allows our colleagues and partners and customers, anyone really, to be able to make a loan using Sage Foundation funds. So in the last year, we supported just under 14,000 entrepreneurs directly, and over 87% of them were women. The other thing that we're really passionate about is early intervention. So we know that if you want to see a more diverse tech industry tomorrow, you need to help young people develop those foundational STEM skills today. So we have a number of partnerships, including here in the Northeast, where I am today in Newcastle, where Sage is headquartered, that focus on bringing STEM to life for young people. And the reason I'm here today is we actually announced one here today in one of the schools, looking at how you can use the power of sport to bring STEM to life in the classroom. So this morning we were there with a group of young people looking at how you could take insights from the Six Nations, which Sage sponsors, to sort of talk about rugby, and to talk about insights in rugby, careers in rugby, to talk about data and how you can take learnings from sport and apply that. And this program specifically focuses on engaging girls as well in the sport, which we know has historically struggled. We also look at our sustainability strategy influencing our own talent strategy as well at Sage, and our team runs a Pathways program that looks at creating opportunity to rethink how we sort of hire and bring people back into the workforce, and a big group of that is women as well, and providing them with the support. And we've got a great returner that sits in my team too. So these are all an example of some of the programs that we run that really have focus on how, as a technology company, we can help to address these barriers and to tackle inequality with a specific focus on gender. So hopefully that brings to life the work that we're doing and what we're passionate about.
Thank you so much for that, Candice. And I think some really great examples there in terms of how we can support across different scenarios when it comes to equity, by really creating the right resources, the tools to give everyone a good start in life, but equally start with an equal playing level field overall as well. So love to hear about all those interesting projects. So now we're going to move on a little bit more around the power of networks. So I would like to come back to Magdalene this time. And Magdalene, back in 2019, you took the initiative to set up the Women's Employee Network in Avanade. So tell us a little bit about what this is about and why internal company groups like this matter to build equity in particular.
Thank you. So I think it's just interesting when I do a throwback, because back in 2017, when I moved into tech, I very quickly realized, being in consulting as a data scientist consultant, that in most projects that I'll find myself either the only woman or maybe 2 out of 20. On a project of 20, you find 2 women or 3. And it was just really strange, if I can put it that way, because you want to relate with everyone, but you also find that you've got a big challenge to prove yourself a lot more, because you're in terms of the dynamics, you fall into a very, very small category. Not to talk about the other bits that makes me very, very different from everyone else if I do the population brainstorming within UK. So when I'll go to my office, if I find a Black person, I get super excited because it's really rare, and that was a fact. So there was all that need to connect with people, to build that community. And I realized there was a lap between when I look at the gender balance and then also the diversity side of things in terms of the race and others. So there was a need for it. I decided, okay, I will take on the mantle to set up the Women's Employee Network Group within the UK and Ireland for my company, Avnad, where I work. And I was given all the support I needed from our HR and our diversity lead in Europe. It was great. I had no idea what I was putting myself forward for. I didn't realize how much effort was required, as it was a +1 to juggle with my work as well as my family life. But boy, do I enjoy the fact that I did it. Looking back, I'm so happy that we've built a big team of over 200 active membership within the UK. Something that started off was initially it was just very simply our vision being to accelerate the progress of women at Avanade and to promote workplace inclusion to ensure that the fabric of our organization really walks the talk when it comes to gender parity and positive collaboration between all employees within the business. And also our mission was also just to ensure that we're inspiring women and allies through the workforce and empower connections within the entire global business and to drive the whole personal and professional growth. So past the first year, when we really just built the whole, let's do more webinars to promote our leaders, female leaders, and to encourage the whole conversation on the need of diversity, we also realized that we need to consider supporting our working families, especially when COVID hit in 2020. So our working families work stream was created to support working families and also support the kids who were at home. So we set up the coding for kids sessions, and my kids, I forgot to mention, I've got 2 amazing kids at home, benefited from being taught to code. So my then 7-year-old and then 9-year-old kids were joining this coding session. And also we also created our networking and community work stream, which involved, speed networking sessions within the business, which was awesome. I didn't realize there was such a dire need to bridge that gap. So it's very easy for people to connect with senior leadership and get opportunities for support through coaching, through mentorship, and of course sponsorship, because that's very important. You need someone who would be able to speak for you in that room where you do not get the chance to speak for yourself. So also raising that awareness to bring people to realize, to move, to get more women into leadership, that conscious effort to network is important. That conscious effort to build your own space in terms of your community is that important. So we did a lot of those sessions where we educate, we educate each other. That's the way I put it. So now, after we've done a bit of maturity in terms of the whole, let's support each other, let's build that community, we realize there's also a need to help the external community. So I love what Cadence mentioned about supporting the young people. It's one of my dying passions. And again, I couldn't reiterate the fact that I've got kids. But the network also decided, let's now support external community. So we've started mentoring and also doing a workshop for external teenagers who are part of a charity that we're engaged with, and also providing additional support in terms of additional outreach, and we're really excited to see that that's really impacting the community, and we can't wait to do more of that. So yes, that's a bit about why we did this.
Excellent. Great. Again, thank you for sharing that, Magdalene. And really great to see that it's not only something that is supporting women and really promoting those abilities to network, to find sponsors that really are able to support them throughout the organization, but also that lens that you have taken in terms of making a positive impact in the local communities as well, where Avanade operates. So really great to see that combination, that mix happening as well. And just to finish a little bit more and to learn a little bit more about the program, I understand that the program also includes an element of male allyship. So would you like to tell us a little bit more about this, and likewise, why does this matter?
Thank you. I think that that's so important, especially when we think about our, the whole point about embrace equity. Male allyship is where you realize that, okay, in a typical setting, you're most likely going to be working more in the world of tech with males. And if we're talking about, encouraging more females into the whole industry and also into leadership, you really can't talk about this without having a conversation that involves men. You need the men at the table, and how best to engage with them than to help that ensure that we're all on the same page in terms of what does male allyship means, and in terms of what does it practically mean. Because I've had conversations and we've run webinars where we would realize we have people who really want to support this cause. They understand the need to support more women into leadership, but how is the big question. And so, yes, male allyship is about bringing that conversation to the next level, the practicality of it. I've got my career advisor who is an amazing male ally, because he gets it. He understands that a male ally is someone who really takes a moment to reflect on the impact of any decisions we're making within the business, from the top in terms of the North Star, in terms of the strategy, and then down to your direct manager, understanding the dynamics of being a female in the workforce that is predominantly male based. A good example is I'm a mom. There are times when I need to rush, go do my school run, and is it easy for someone who is a male to get where you are coming from, the dynamics of it, and give you the support that you need so that you can still thrive? Should I feel I need to hide the fact that I'm a mom because I'm scared it might be detrimental if I wanted to go for promotion? Those are the practicalities of it, isn't it? And there's more to it, but this is the concept of male allyship, is making sure that we are supporting our males who are keen to support us by giving them the practical side of the whole story, so they can really do their best to help make this vision and mission a reality.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that. And Ceci, I would love to hear on the topic of male allyship from the rest of the panel. So perhaps, Naomi, would you like to get started on that? So what is your take on male allyship, and why does this matter? How we can bring more men into the conversation for the fight for equity and equality?
Yeah, I absolutely agree that it's totally needed to have men involved in that cause. So from my side, I have a 11 years old boy, so I can tell you what I tell him, because I think we have to work also from the younger age. I think the first thing that we have to promote to men is that first, diversity is not only a moral or ethical requirement. First, it's a pleasure. I mean, it's always very enriching to work with someone different, which will have a different lens and different look about a problem. It's maybe obvious to say that, but we are living in a world which is more and more complex. We have huge challenges to solve, and there is no other option than having fun on the journey, because it will be a very long journey, and it's not possible to find pleasure only with people who work exactly the way you work. Of course, the second argument is performance, but this has been said a very big number of times, that we are much more performing when we are in a diverse team. That said, I think that we also have to be conscious that it's not always easy. It's not always easy not to be in your comfort zone, because for the men who have been, let's say, who have worked a large part of their career with some rules which have worked for their bosses, they also want the rules to work for them. And I think there is a very important question, which is how do we offer in the companies a right future to everyone? and we have of course to ensure that the future is good for the women and good for all the minorities who have to be more visible. And how do we do this while keeping good perspective for everyone? And I think really it goes by role modeling again. I think I've done that in my team. So in your team, I think really the thing that I would like to say to anyone, man or woman, is take the risk to choose the person who is the most different from the rest of your team when you are making a recruitment. This is always the best recruitment that you can do at equal competencies. And also pay attention to the culture that you want to promote, because diversity can become inclusion only if you are very clear on the purpose that you want to reach, and on the let's say the behaviors which are acceptable or not acceptable within your team. And this is when you are very clear on the common purpose and the common, let's say, rules of behavior, where you really can become efficient in a diverse team. And that means that you need discipline before giving autonomy and empower people. And I think, I think it's an argument also to say that it's a demanding challenge, and in a culture, on corporate culture, where we always promote very hard challenges and so on. I think it's also a good argument to say it's not the easy way, but this is the challenging and demanding way. So take this way, because it's worth it.
Great, thank you so much. And perhaps Russo Canis, would you also like to add your insights, your perspective on this?
Absolutely. So I think that we have heard so many kind of like very concrete thoughts about it already, but maybe just to add from my perspective. So I would actually approach it from two angles. They were kind of covered, but just to kind of really emphasize the message. So first, for men, I would definitely kind of encourage them to support women when they can. So I have actually personal experiences, kind of positive experiences coming across to different like male colleagues who have been able to really like support me and even push me a bit kind of forward, like just take the role, even though it feels like a little bit big for you, but just go for it. So I think that this is indeed like what was already mentioned, so that it is a change when, for example, in tech we have more and more women, hopefully now in the future, and bit by bit coming in and taking these kind of like leadership positions. But it is definitely a kind of like a change that is worth it, so that then we are really able to also create a more positive culture and more positive working places, and also really like embrace the diversity, also from perspective that, okay, for example, in tech, we are really used to working hard and like working long hours and so on, but then we have kind of like the female maybe female workers who would come in and they would have maybe different responsibilities regarding family. I'm not saying that men wouldn't, but often it is so that, for example, me, I've been like a single mother for 5 years for 2 small kids, and at the same time building your career. So it sets some boundaries, and I think it's healthy boundaries. So also it enforces this kind of like a healthy transformation for working cultures if there are more women in the leadership positions and overall in tech, I would say. So that would be the first thing. And then the second thing, it was also already mentioned, but I already mentioned my kids. So I would definitely also approach this through that. So basically, we have to set an example. As I said, I've been working, kind of like building my career, having small kids, and they have seen that sometimes, mommy needs to work at night. And I need to sometimes prioritize, for example, the work over them, or going and doing something with them. But then again, I also like get really motivated that I actually do this also for my kids, to really set an example that, they can do whatever they want. It's regardless of if they're girl or boy. just like take your chances and go for it. So I think that these two kind of approaches to how to really embrace it, how to have more people, different kinds of people working in tech should work. So kind of encouraging men who are in those positions to support women when they can. And then again, like also approach it from through our kids. So that's that.
Absolutely, very valuable. Thank you so much. And certainly, hopefully, those young boys and young people that are joining us today, that will also draw from the inspirations overall. Candice, would you like to also add your perspective on the matter?
I think there's the other panelists have touched on most of the main issues, but I think coming back to this theme of culture and organizations creating a culture where men can be allies is so important. It's not an accident that we're seeing more women in more senior roles. We've heard all the statistics around how financially successful organizations are, where they have women sat on boards, etc. And the best companies to work for, the gender balance, all those stats, right? But I think from a personal perspective, for me, I could only really lean into my career and start to do the things I was passionate about when I had the support and allyship of the men in my life, including my husband, my managers, my son. These are all people that I need to be my ally, to champion to me as a woman in my career. So I think having a workplace and a support network that you surround yourself with that gives you that allyship is so incredibly important. And if you don't have it, then you look for it, or you move and you go somewhere where it is, because it's a much better time now to be a woman and to be working and to be having exciting careers and to be able to bring your talent. And I think that those two things, allyship and culture, go hand in hand, and there's a lot of choice as well, so you can choose. And I think that the last thing I'd like to add to that is just regarding mentorship. Having other women in your life that have kind of been where you are and are able to sort of give you some advice. It's not always easy, so I do think that for me has certainly been incredibly valuable in my career.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Candice. And we can definitely see some recurring themes there, particularly when it comes to that career sponsor, having someone, particularly even if it's a male manager, to really support your career path as a woman, and to really, as Naomi mentioned earlier on, raising your voice and expressing that voice when you're not able to do it yourself, or perhaps there's a little bit of that fear, that sense of holding oneself back. So I think that's super, super important. And yes, certainly, boys and men need to be part of the conversation. So we're not here as competitors, we're not as enemies, but together we can achieve greatness and certainly have a more diverse world overall. So thank you for that. So just moving on towards the end of the panel, before we open up the floor for some questions coming from the audience, I would just like to touch upon the topic of technology and the digital world. So we certainly see that we are living in an increasingly digitalized world. And when it comes to tech and perhaps artificial intelligence in particular, what role do you think tech can play in creating equity for all? So who would like to start us off with this particular question?
I can start maybe.
Sure.
What I think is that, as I was saying just before, digital technology is an incredible gift in terms of accessibility. Can concern education, can concern financial services, and we see that digital technologies, I think for me, are really a way to empower all the communities who did not have access before to kind of premium services, to have this access and to be empowered to reach their goal and to leverage all the resources which were traditionally reserved to an elite, basically. And it's also very applicable to what Magdalene was describing about the network, for example. So I think here it's also at the core of our commitment in Société Générale, in associations such as 15 Tech, or those kind of associations, such as, of course, Teens in AI, to really seize the opportunity as girls or as women to the fantastic network and knowledge that has become accessible through digital. This is the first thing. I think the second big advantage, and notably about AI, is that in a world, let's say, empowered by data and AI, decision making is changing. Decision making is not so much based on intuition or let's say a fluffy position that you may have on such topic. It should be much more data driven and fact based. And I think it's a fantastic opportunity to, you know, to materialize the biases that we have in the decision. I think, for example, in the way, in the field where I work in banking, in terms of credit decision, we know that in the past we had a bias in terms of gender, in terms of credit decision making. Now that we are processing data and using models to take better credit decision, we can objectivize this bias and we can fight this bias. It's always easier, you know, to fight an enemy that you know. So thanks to data and AI, we can really identify the enemy and correct the bias. So I think this is a fantastic opportunity. And I think it's also one of the main reasons probably why girls have to be here in the tech and the data and the AI businesses and jobs, because they need to be here to make the good usage of the technology and to let's say to orientate the decision towards a more sustainable work. And maybe the last one would be about the enterprise culture. In a digital company, you will have a culture which is much more driven by the outcome. We will look at your results. We will look at what you've done, what you've delivered. Does your product work? Does it doesn't work? Is it used by the customer? Is it not used? And you will be in a culture which does not value the number of hours you spend in your desk from 8 to 17. You know, so it will be much easier, I think, also for women, because I agree that fact-based, they still have to carry on a family charge sometimes, which is sometimes bigger. And definitely, I am a mother of 3. I will never have been able to have the career I had, notably in the recent years, without this culture of outcome and the total flexibility in my time, in my work time organization. So I think it's also a hidden benefit, maybe.
Great, thank you so much for that, Naomi. And I love that you mentioned technology is an incredible gift. So certainly we can maximize it for tech for good, and particularly when it comes to the equity conversation. So I'm just conscious of time, so would like to welcome one more perspective from the panel. So who would like to add an additional perspective on this?
I'm happy to just add one thing. Sure. Being a data scientist by background, the whole algorithm and what we are putting in there goes a long way to impact on the future in terms of these innovative solutions that we are creating using technology. So there's two sides to the story. What can technology do? There's the whole data literacy, but there's also the ethics, the whole digital ethics, the literacy side to it. What we need to create that culture of making people more aware of what is okay and what isn't okay. This bias needs to be clarified to such a point that it's so easy for anyone, whichever category you fall into. When we talk about diversity, you should go in there and put in the right information that doesn't carry your bias or the wrong information into our innovative space. So that means, well, as a society, we need to become more aware, right? So work needs to be done within businesses, work needs to be done within the companies, work needs to be done by companies, governments, to change the whole concept of what is okay in our society. We've come a long way, but more can be done. So it just feeds through, and then it just prepares the future generation to be a better place for a much better environment. I mean, that's just the nicest way to put it.
Of course, thank you so much. And on that note, Magdalene, thank you, because particularly here at Teens and AI, we're certainly passionate about driving that and challenging the status quo, as we can see with technologies such as AI in particular, where lots of bias has been built in. And that also stems from the fact that it's lacking diversity in the technology fields, not only from a gender perspective, but also ethnicity. And that's something that we certainly strive to achieve and to inspire throughout our programs. And likewise, welcome not only girls, of course, but likewise all genders to be inspired and spark that interest when it comes to the fields of technology, as they are very also incredible skills to be developing for the future, regardless of which pathway you take as a career or new education for those young audiences out there. So thank you so much for that. I would like to, on that note, end the panel discussion overall, and welcome for the last 5 minutes or so a couple of questions from our audiences. So we have our young teen audiences joining us from our YouTube stream, as well as those joining us through our Zoom event as well. So please, if you have a question, feel free to post it in the chat, whether it's YouTube or Zoom, and our project managers will supporting in raising those questions. So I have one that has come through, which relates a little bit to what we've just been speaking. So how do we eliminate biased behaviors from your daily work? So is there anything else that we could add on that? And perhaps if one of you would like to take that question.
I was just gonna, I can jump in first. I think it's around educating yourself on bias, right, to start with. So, you know, there's many biases that we all have, some of which we're not even aware of. So I think doing exactly what we're doing today, having conversations, you know, discussing bias, what that actually means, you know, really being not being afraid to ask questions and to delve into that more. And then, you know, once you've got that basis of education and you know, insight, you can then start to challenge behaviors. But I think, again, back to the point we we're talking about with culture, if you've got the right culture where, you know, you're really supporting one another, and you know, that should be quite an easy thing to do, and doesn't necessarily have to be something that's confrontational. But yeah, I think for me it starts with education.
Excellent. I'll just jump. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry.
Yes.
I think it's very important that for any business, any innovative solution, any technology solution that is being developed should include in its strategy a digital ethics. There should be a part that says we have reviewed everything, or we have to pass for that technology to pass, to be usable. It's ticked these boxes. We've reviewed it and it's passed when it comes to bias, when it comes to, you know, the whole concept of ethics. So that's really, really important, because that means we are consciously making an effort to change the narrative that is being fed into our solution, right? Which will then impact the whole society.
That's right. And just also to build on that, we actually have an interesting question regarding how does disability come into play when it comes to gender equality and equity? So how do we take this in consideration, and how could potentially technology and AI help make spaces more accessible for everyone? And anyone who would like to take that question?
I'm not sure if I got it correctly. Could you repeat it?
Yes, absolutely. Embracing equity goes also beyond gender inequalities and into the disability space. How can tech and AI help make spaces more accessible for everyone? And perhaps, Cadence, is that something you would like to share some inputs as well? Because I know Sage also has some great programs, particularly also to tackle disability.
I think this is where I preface my answer with, I am not a technologist, and you know, I know that there'll be a lot of people much smarter than me looking at this solution, which is the good news. I think from when it comes to inclusion in general, it's about, again, around you know, speaking to those individuals who might have a disability and understanding the adjustments that you can make for them. I know that I mentioned our Pathways program that specifically focuses on access into employment for people who may have a disability, because we understand that their barriers or their experience is different to people who don't. So, you know, there are a number of programs that exist across, you know, in a lot of organizations looking at that. And I think generally now much more awareness around trying to have conversation to really open up and understand the challenges facing people with disability that didn't exist perhaps you know, 3, 4, 5 years ago. So for me, I think there's still a lot more work though to be done, and I think for that it really starts with, like I say, educating and starting the conversation and having company culture that really encourages that. And I know you know, different networks exist as well within organizations that focus on that, so they can raise those concerns and ideas and opportunities, and even more so when that starts to feed into the development of product that's been discussed as well. So from my perspective, I feel like there's work happening in that space, but I still feel like there's quite a bit more work to be done.
Sure, great. Anyone else would like to add any additional comments? Okay, so I'm just going to move on to see, so last question. So from my personal experience, some bias are rooted in men behavior and attitude, especially those with tech expertise. What would be your recommendations to influence them and make them change perspective? So we'll discuss a couple of elements earlier on, and we certainly highlighted how important it is that male allyship is also part of the conversation and a part of the solution. So is there anything else that we would like to add to that as well? How can we change those mindsets, those behaviors? Perhaps often we hear as well, like, is it actually needed to have a women-only group, or perhaps incubator supporting women-only founders? What can we say to those who perhaps still carry that kind of perception? And perhaps, Risa, would you like to kick off this question?
Yeah, sure. This is a good question. And basically, based on my experiences, when we have these kind of biases, it's actually not about that male would have them or men would have them solely. I would say that these kind of behaviors and attitudes and thoughts are actually coming as often from females. So I think that we shouldn't kind of like focus too much on changing, how men think or how they would behave or so on. But it's more like equally. And it's because it's kind of like when we talk about biases, so they are, of course, like in our heads, it's how we have a kind of, how we are like seeing the world, how we were brought up and so on. So it's not really like only, on one side. So that would be the first comment. And then, of course, like it was mentioned already, I think that the most important thing is that really to kind of like understand why we think in a certain way, and if there is a bias, and so that we actually recognize that something should be fixed. So that is, of course, always the first step. But basically, so basically, I don't know like what else to add about how to change. I think the recognizing our behaviors and thinking is the first step, and from there, then we can, drive the change. Of course, one thing that I already a little bit maybe touched upon is setting an example. So when we talk about tech, so for example, I work in IT consultancy, we have, of course, most of the people who are working in my teams, for example, are male, because there are so many more people who are educated and have the experiences who are male. If there are such kind of like females that I come across and who have the kind of I would say the foundation to become an expert in this field, so I do everything that I can to support them, and we can really like change the world also from this perspective. So kind of like supporting women, making sure that they get the opportunities that they do deserve. And then, of course, like for example, I have wonderful customers whom we are serving, and I actually do have also only female teams working for them in tech field, and that is amazing because like they are really doing great work. Of course, it's not what we are aiming at, right? We don't necessarily want to have only female teams, but it's just like one extreme, which really sets an example that in tech you can really be an expert and very good despite of the gender. That does not define you. So I think that, really like supporting women is the key, of course, despite of, so basically my message is that it's not about the gender, it's about, the person, about the skills, and understanding our behavior and like trying to, change that, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Maybe just to complete on what Ruza say, I think what we can do as women when we are witness or when we are in the situation to receive this kind of bias, very often my experience is that it's only an answer that the men assume that about our needs. So what we can do is to express what are really our needs. I remember when I was back from my maternity leave the first time, I had a new boss, and my new boss, the question he asked me the day I came back was, but do you have the right nanny for your kids? And do you have an husband who will share with you the school and so on? And I had a step back and think, but I think your question is, what do I need to succeed? So what I need to succeed is to be able to choose my team. I need your trust, and I need a clear purpose of what we are going to do together, okay? So everything, all the rest, I've cared about it. What I need from you is not that, is that and that and that. And I see it was also, because in his mind, it was not a bias. It was just what he assumed I need for succeed, and it was not not a way to discriminate me in his mind, even if I could have felt it like that. So I think what we can do is be clear on what we need to succeed and what we don't need, because we've already took care of that.
Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing that personal experience, Naomi, and really interesting. Yes, because there can be lots of unconscious bias, and there's also it's a matter of being aware of that, but at the same time providing the tools, the examples. That's where we can identify it. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today in this panel. I would like to now close the discussion and thank everyone for those who have tuned in. And some really great perspectives have come through today's session, and some of them which I would like to highlight. So we certainly heard about, we are only limited by imagination. We can certainly drive and strive our futures and shape our career paths accordingly. It's also about, when it comes to supporting women in the workplace, that's, having a North Star and making sure that there is a clear example of what does good look like. We've also heard about how career sponsors are super, super important when it comes to supporting career development and career advancement in the workplace for women. And nevertheless, of course, wrapping up the last point, which, of course, men and young boys come as part of the conversation. We are here to work together, and hopefully that we can support one another to drive equity and inclusion for a more sustainable world overall, given that there is lots to gain through having those diverse perspectives, a diverse society, diverse organizations, and of course how we can use tech to also support and enabling overall that equity and inclusion, as well as bearing in mind removing any bias, but likewise also making sure that is used for the benefit and driving technology in an ethical way. So thank you so much, everyone. This now ends the panel conversation, and we'll now be closing the YouTube channel for a stream, and those who are joining us for the next